America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First thing I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that I don't have a mustache. This is not Supervisor Walensky talking. Supervisor Walensky, I'm very envious. He has taken his wife on a very romantic holiday for, can you believe it, Bob? You know, February 14th, Valentine's Day, being on a river.
He's out of town?
He's out of town, yeah. He's going to be looking at the moonrise over some romantic river someplace.
And there's so many romantic places right here in Calaveras County.
Well, yeah, Cosgrove Creek. I can imagine you'll be looking over the moon
shimmering over Cosgrove Creek. Indeed.
Nothing more romantic than Government Center, of course.
Okay.
This is the bottom row.
Okay, I would like to start by reading the announcements on the closed sessions of February 5th. Closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated legal litigation, significant exposure to litigation. That case was canceled. Closed session was held pursuant to Government Code Section 5495.6, conference with labor negotiators, county representative, CEO and assistant CEO, director of human resources and risk management concerning SEIU, miscellaneous employees. Nothing to report out of that session. A closed session was held pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, public employee performance evaluation, and nothing to report out of that session. A closed session was held regarding a conference with the real estate negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. Property APNs as follows. It's 44-011-050, -049 and -052 plus 051. We had an agency negotiator, Bryn Harrington, or alternate to be determined negotiating parties. Brian Voorhees and Greg Opinski are the owners of the properties under negotiations. Instruction to negotiator regarding possible purchase price, financing options, resulting out of nothing to report from those sessions. Okay, now our attention is directed to the consent agenda. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. However, if any board member, staff member, or interested party would like to request the removal of an item from this consent agenda, we can discuss it after the other items. Do I hear the board members requesting a removal of an item? Anybody from the public? I would like to pull item 6 for more in-depth discussion. On items 1 through 9, excluding 6, do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. And item 6, Mr. Miller, do you have an explanation of that?
49.
Yes, this is an amendment to an existing contract to extend the amount to $150,000 from the original first $50,000, and it's an extension of the time period through June 30th of this year. We don't anticipate using all the money, but we asked for the extra money because we still have significant staffing shortages. The engineer, Scott Mums from Marsco, works about 15 to 25 hours per week on average, which is about 2 to 3 days. The projects that he's focusing on this upcoming year include the bus shelters, park and rides, 3 bridges, Hoover Bridge, Railroad Flat Esperanza, Stagecoach. He will also be working on the West Point Bike Path, and he's also the coordinator for pulling all of our CIP projects together. Something we haven't done in the past is the staff in each division of Public Works have brought all the projects forward. We're compiling them in a single document to bring them to you in the budget so you understand what our work plan is and what our project load is for the next 2 to 3 years. And that will be a living document that will change year to year. So he'll be our coordinator on that project also.
Okay, I've had Mike come in to explain this because in the agenda packet, it was focusing on some items on the list that, it seems as though they're not really able to move forward in an expeditious manner, like the O'Byrne's Ferry improvements in the bridge and everything. Those are decades away, I would think. And so I just wanted a more in-depth explanation.
That was an oversight. I didn't clearly explain in the report is under his current contract, he had already been working under these. Some of them have some things continuing, but a lot of those were examples of the work he was currently doing. We didn't expand on the proposed stuff that he would continue to help on.
Okay, and since it's up to $150,000, in the event that we were to be successful in our recruitment and hire somebody, then the contract would be terminated. His services would be terminated. At
a time that we had our positions all filled in the department and a transition period, and we had a project list and knew that we could let him go, we would do that.
Okay. All right, with that explanation, does anybody in the audience have any questions about this particular item? Any board member?
I'll move the item, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded for approval of item 6. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried. Okay, we're at the spot on the agenda for public comments. If anybody would like to address the board on any item not on the agenda, this is the time for you to come forward, sign in, state your name, and let us have it.
Good morning. My name is Lorraine Pagaya. My husband, George, and I live out on Jesus Maria Road in Mountain Ranch. And last year we attended a lot of the town hearings that were going on where people were talking about what they want for the future of our county. And one of the subjects that came up was our rural roads and the problems. And we heard about some grants being applied for, and then later realized that apparently we had gotten some money. I read it in the paper, and then we saw the west end of Jesus Maria Road had been resurfaced over where it meets Highway 26. And it's a beautiful job they've done, and with nice white borders to help you drive, and they've made it safe and very nice for the few residents that live at that end. And so then I got talking to some of our neighbors because we live at the east end near Railroad Flat, and it's much more populated at that end. And we talked to our supervisor, Steve Walensky, who I know isn't here today, and he suggested that we get together and write a letter and send it to the Public Works Department. And so that's what we have done. We've created a letter for the Public Works Department, and I've brought a copy to this board because I'd like to remind you, again, as I said, the east end of Jesus Maria Road is much more heavily populated. We have the school buses that come there 4 times a day, delivering and picking up kindergarten through 12th grade students. We have the fire station, the main fire station for our district is on that road, and of course they're very busy and very important with their expensive fire trucks and their emergency equipment. We've got the meetings that the firefighters have weekly while they do their training, and once a month the board of directors meet there. Lots of traffic going back and forth. We've got mail delivery every day, and we've got UPS and FedEx trucks coming and going. We've got weekly garbage pickup on our road and bi-weekly recycle, and many of the neighbors are very into this. And so you've got those big rambling trucks going back and forth. Propane trucks constantly coming because there's competition. Many different companies are going out there. I'm telling you, that road gets busy, gets lots of use, and it's in very poor condition. We've got all kinds of delivery trucks coming and going out there and tearing up what's left of the road. When you've got a pothole and you have trucks going, it makes it even worse in a hurry. We've even got realtors coming out because we're growing like mad. We've got motorcyclists, bicycles, and even some brave people ride horses or walk that road. To make a long story short, we are requesting that the Public Works Department, instead of continuing down on the west end, they stopped at Hoover Road, which is near the creek. And then there's a very long stretch, 5 miles or more, where there are very, very sparsely populated homes. Now, over on the east end, Railroad Flat, you can see there's lots of traffic, lots of trucks. We have requested that when the board gets started, now that spring's here, when the Public Works Department gets started on this project again, which I understand they will be doing, we're requesting that they consider, and we would like your support in asking them to look into starting at Railroad Flat and going that direction at the next stage of the resurfacing. And I've got signatures from neighbors and other people. I could have got more if it wasn't so snowy out there and the roads weren't so bad. But I'd like to submit this copy of the letter to your board and ask for your consideration in supporting what the neighbors in this area are requesting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. There's a couple of guys sitting in the back of the room there that raise your hands. She needs to deliver the letter to you, apparently. So, see, Lorraine, see those gentlemen in the back?
Carol.
Lorraine?
Public Works Department?
Yes, right there. So, okay, thank you for coming in. Do I see any other member of the public that would like to address the board this morning on an item not on the agenda? Is there anything that anybody on the board would like to talk about not on the agenda? Okay, it looks like that we have item number 11, that this is discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of an ordinance repealing and reenacting Chapter 16.24 of the County of Calaveras Code establishing standards for dedication of land and or payment of fees for parks and recreation facilities in conjunction with subdivision approval. Community Development Agency is presenting this item. It's been continued from the January 8th meeting and the January 22nd meeting, and we're supposed to take action on the item today.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Selman, Planning Director. I have provided you the amended language based on your previous direction. We worked with council to assure that it would accomplish what we understood to be your goals. At this point, unless you have further questions, we'd recommend you waive the second reading and adopt the ordinance, subject to public input.
I have a few questions. Bob?
Sir.
It's 2.5 acres per 1,000 residences. Now, on the dedication of the 2.5 acres, that's undeveloped. That's just 2.5 acres of raw land. It's not 2.5 acres of developed park. Is that correct?
It's a calculation of acreage, yes.
Of acreage. So then we still need additional fees to develop it, or we have a vacant piece of ground.
It would depend upon what was being developed and how they proposed to meet that requirement. But yes, presumably there would still be a need for additional monies to actually develop the full park.
Okay. On page 2, item 4, it says there's a specified period within state law which we have to spend. I was a little confused here. My assumption is there's a specified time in which we have to spend money. Obviously, if they dedicate 2.5 acres and the county accepts it, then it doesn't have to be developed in some specified time frame. But if we accept money in lieu of, then that money has to be spent within a specified time frame. Is that correct?
There is a time frame that we have to have. Typically, it's 5 years. It can be extended at least once while you're actually doing operations, as long as there are valid plans.
Okay.
My understanding.
But the timeline is for spending in lieu money, not if we accept the land, we don't have to have the 2.5 acres developed into a park within 5 years.
In theory, the application would apply to both. If you don't have any plans, you're not doing anything, at some point you could receive a challenge back that, I dedicated a park, you accepted it, you haven't done anything, it's 15 years later, what's going on, give me my park back. But the basic rule is as long as you've got a plan to actually utilize that for park purposes and you're moving forward on that plan, you should have no problem at all.
Well, I tell you what, for government, including county government, to get anything done in 5 years is lightning speed these days. So,
well, again, typically what we would be looking at is the dedicated. I mean, if we're truly talking
right.
a dedicated parkland, we're looking at something that would be inside a subdivision. A larger one would typically be developed in part by the project proponent because it is to serve their subdivision as well as other area residents. So typically this isn't going to be a problem. If we actually have a dedication of parkland, we would normally have covered that under the tentative map or other improvement requirements. I'm not too concerned about that one as much as the dedication of fees in lieu thereof.
Fees seem to be...
The fees are really the problem.
Yeah. Fees, we better get them spent within 5 years or then...
Correct.
We are in trouble. The land, I think we would have more time.
Correct.
Okay. On page 2 under C here, you have under this affordable housing element. Is this part of the Quimby Act or is this something we're putting in independent of the Quimby Act on affordable housing? It says exemptions, and then you have an exemption for affordable housing. Page 2.
I believe the exemption is part of the Quimby Act. I would have to defer to counsel on that. The language is standard language out of state law, but to tell you the truth, I don't remember whether that's specific.
I didn't bring my copy of this statute.
Okay, it's our exemption apparently. So that is
well,
an
there's one
exemption
thing I don't like under this, I must say, and that's item C, 2C, where you say under an agreement that guarantees all of the units are maintained for lower and very low income households as units for rent or sale or transfer for the lesser of a period of 30 years of the actual life of the existence of the structure. When you freeze something like that for 30 years and say you can't have price appreciation and it's going to be subsidized housing, to me you're just building in basically a slum, and that's what we're going to have if we incorporate that paragraph.
Okay.
I mean, it's one thing to say we'll subsidize you to own a house, and then you get the price appreciation and you maintain it, et cetera. It's another thing to say that we basically have 30-year subsidized housing here or the life of the unit. I'm assuming they know that when you subsidize something for 30 years, there won't be any life of the unit left. It'll probably be gone in 20 years.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, what this requirement really does, and the way we have always interpreted this, is that is not a freezing of price or value. It is bracketed. So as long as whoever sells that property or rents the property does so to a qualified individual within that time frame, the 30 years, that moves with the market, just like real estate values do. Every year, the terminology of moderate income, from which all these others are based, are reassessed by the state. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, but it basically follows the market also.
That's not how I read this. That's how you interpret it, though?
Well, yes, because that is exactly what that definition of lower and very low income are based on, is a moving evaluation of median income that is set annually by the state. Ours has been tending to go up through the years based on real estate. I'm not going to be too surprised if for the next year or two we start seeing a little bit of a migration down. But that, again, is following the market. So
usually when you freeze something like this for 30 years and say it's going to be low income or very low income, we've got a problem.
Well, we're saying that those units have to be committed to that income level. And as that income level moves up or down, so does the requirement.
Okay. But there's nothing in here, I mean, this is a recreation deal. There's nothing in here that requires affordable housing. It just says if you have affordable housing under these codes. Is that correct?
They would be granted a credit against that.
Then I think I'll fight it in the housing element then.
Okay.
Okay. I was a little, on item 4, page 3, private recreational facilities. It says for common interest developments, a maximum credit of 20% of the required dedication will be credited against private recreation facilities within the project. I thought we said if we want any credit, they have to be open to the public. Are you saying now if you have something that's private and restricted to the residents of the development, that they're going to get a 20% credit against the recreational facilities?
That is exactly what that says. So you can have
I think the board's
private,
direction
but
was
you would-
exactly the opposite of that.
Well,
that
we
if
have
there's-
to include private recreational facilities, as I understand the law. So
We do?
we have set a minimum amount of credit against those that we felt could meet both the requirements of the law and your board's direction. So they're obviously having to still provide 80% of the park improvements, and only 20% would be credited against the private.
But that's required under the Quimby Act?
That's correct. We had this discussion, I think, when it was introduced.
Okay.
And I did get the 2.5 in.
Get the decimal point in
The
there?
decimal is there.
Well, excuse me, Tom,
Go
I
ahead.
thought you were still
Go
reading.
ahead,
I'm just,
okay.
item of curiosity, I don't know what a stock cooperative is.
Oh.
It's a financing and title where procedure, as opposed to taking a fee title simple, you're basically dealing with, I believe, is a corporate type of ownership, and I guess you're buying stock in the corporation as opposed to buying fee title, so that
So like a timeshare or something?
not really. This is a pretty obscure section of code. I haven't really seen it used in years, and it's been in the MAP Act for years. But basically, if the corporation holds the title to land, and I understand you're holding stock in the corporation.
I see.
Okay, so if I'm mistaken, I'm sorry. That's my understanding of the way it worked, and I have never seen one of these things used in my years. So,
Okay, thank you.
On page 4, under schedule for use, 16.24.040, it says at the time of approval of the final or parcel map, the CDD, upon the recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission. I guess I'd rather take out upon and say with a recommendation, because it makes it sound like the the Park and Rec Commission has greater authority than the CDD department. So my preference would be to take out upon and just say with a recommendation take out upon the and say with a recommendation from the Calaveras Parks and Rec, because CDD needs to make its own recommendation.
I would find that an insignificant change, and certainly it's however you'd like to express that.
On page 5, under 2B, you say when somebody dedicates some land, but it's not 2.5 acres per thousand, it's something less, so they pay a fee for the balance. Then you say those fees shall be used for the improvement of the existing park or recreational facilities serving the subdivision. Why are you conditioning those fees where you're not conditioning any other?
Well, you'll notice that this particular section talks about when there is less than a need for full acreage because there is an existing park. So the presumption is, in lieu of providing acreage, you would immediately file fees, and that is the specific park that you would be using them on. But that is premised on there is an existing local or regional site.
Okay, suppose the fees aren't necessary, then what if you say the fees shall only be used on site, or wouldn't it be?
I suppose
Maybe you should say the fees first priority should be, so if they're, if you don't need it on site, you can use it off site. Or do you always perceive that there will be a need to spend all of the fees on site?
I would be amazed. I mean, the kinds of fees we're talking about are relatively small, and if they aren't, then we're going to need them. So I don't think it's going to be a problem, to tell you the truth. I mean, mostly we're talking, parcel maps are those they're going to be very small fees. So I don't think there's a possibility of not needing those fees to do park improvements. And if we're talking a large development that would generate a significant fee, we're also talking large populations, which would presumably not only benefit but desire the park to be there. So that's where the money should be spent.
Well, all it takes is one instance where it doesn't, and you say shall be used, and then we end up giving the fees back.
Well, again, if we see a problem developing or your board does, we can always bring this ordinance back and amend it.
Well, why not just do it right now and just say the fees first priority shall be used for the improvement? So that if you have excess fees after on-site improvements, that they just basically go into the fee bank like any other people paying fees.
Except that they can't be used anywhere in the county, Tom.
No, but I mean, anybody that's paying fees, is the fees are not most likely going to be used on site. They're going to be used off-site, but it's going to be a regional facility that the folks from this subdivision get to utilize also.
I suppose if there were multiple park facilities, it could be used that way. Again, I don't see it's a problem. I suppose it's not a problem one way or the other, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think if there's a park, it's going to be used at its nearest facility, and
So,
if the board
Tom,
is uncomfortable, we can certainly do
Tom,
that.
if I understand you, you're interpreting this as serving the subdivision, that the park is within the subdivision. You can have a park outside the subdivision still serving the subdivision.
I'm assuming, from reading this, I assumed it meant it had to be within the subdivision. You're reading it that it can be outside the subdivision?
Yeah, it just says serving the subdivision. It could be in or outside the subdivision.
Adjacent to the
Is that what-
subdivision.
Adjacent.
So you're saying it can be outside the subdivision?
Yes.
We're not limited to the subdivision?
No,
Oh, well,
absolutely.
that was my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, my last question is on page 6, under additional cost for in lieu fees. I'm puzzled by that C, where you basically say, when the requirements of this section are met solely on the basis of the payment of a fee in lieu of land dedication. And then you say, in addition to the in lieu fee, the subdivider shall also pay an amount equal to 20% of the in lieu fee to offset the cost of curb, gutters, drainage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're saying that, first off, what's the cost of all that you're doing the 20% against? And you're saying that anybody that pays a fee has to pay an additional 20% of that fee for these improvements, even though you don't know where the money's going to be spent or whether the improvements are necessary.
Well, I think the idea was if you were going to dedicate, there would normally have been those sorts of street improvements required
Right.
in addition to the actual dedication, just as part of your improvement plans. So this is an attempt just to recover part of what would be those normal construction, not of the park, but of the site itself relative to a subdivision.
So you're saying, in other words, your in lieu fee isn't X, it's X plus 20%.
To the extent that there are improvements necessary, yes.
Well, how do you know that
Not
the
in the
improvements
park.
necessary if you're paying the fee? You don't know exactly where you're going to be doing the improvements.
Well, again, if you'll remember, we're going to be making a specific request back to the board for how those fees and funds get used, or parklands get used at the time of the recording a map, and that's when the fee would be set. So that if you found that there was absolutely no improvements necessary to the ground relative to these street lighting and all those other facilities, your board wouldn't collect that portion of the fee because it wouldn't be part of the requirements.
So you're saying when they come in to record a map, that it's going to be on this board's agenda, and we're going to have to decide at that point in time where those fees will be spent? We don't have 5 years in which to decide where those fees will be spent?
That is exactly what we required back here on page 2, I believe, where we just changed the language to with, where I just lost it. Hang on a second. Page 4, that's the schedule for use. that's at the time of the map, excuse me, on page 4, 162404. Yes, we're bringing back the plan on how those are going to be used, and at that point we would know exactly what the fee was, and that's the time of the recording of the map when the fee is assessed. So that is exactly how it would work.
And then once the board does that, we have no ability to change an allocation over that 5-year period if we decide, oh, my golly, this
I
isn't
think
going
it's
to work
like
out.
everything else in this world. Your board has the right to go back and re-review the facts through time and determine if something else is necessary or more prudent, or there may in fact be a better appropriation for the program. There's a requirement that you dedicate. I think if there is discretion involved, I can't tell you your board is locked down forever. It can never change its mind.
I'm interested in a lot of flexibility here, quite frankly, because we're starting a new program. We have some regional parks, not very many. We have some on the Highway 4 corridor, whether it be Feeney Park or something up at White Pines or the like, that are regional in nature. What I don't want to do is end up holding up the approval of final maps or parcel maps because we have a big dispute over park fees, or to lock it in place at that point in time and then say, well, geez, upon further review, this isn't such a good idea, we should come up with Plan B. Do we have that kind of flexibility?
I would respectfully suggest that you do have a certain amount of flexibility, and your greatest flexibility is if this ordinance doesn't work, we're going to be back here trying to amend it so it does work. Okay. I think part of this is just we need an opportunity to put this in place and make sure what we believe works, in fact works. And clearly, if the public or your board does not believe that it's working, we're going to be back in front of you again trying to amend this to address those concerns. And this is based on some
once
pretty
we adopt
plans.
something, it's a lot harder to amend it than it is to get it right at the point
You're
of adoption.
absolutely correct, and it's impossible to tell you how it's going to work until we have something we've done a couple of examples on, to tell you the truth.
Okay, that concludes my comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but as a point of clarification, Mr. Selman, since the origination of this Parks and Recreation Commission, it's my understanding that there have been a number of what's referred to as TAC meetings with potential applicants, and the Parks and Recreation Commissioner has set in on those meetings, and I would assume that would be an ongoing activity. And during those initial planning meetings, the requirements of this ordinance are going to be woodshedded out, vetted out before they ever get here. It'll come to this board with the blessing of, as it says, the Parks and Recreation Commission's recommendations. I mean, that would certainly be the way that I would expect it to
go
work.
to the plan. This goes to the Planning Commission first, right?
It would go to the Planning Commission for approval,
Okay,
yes.
so-
Well, the document will go to the planning. No, we're going to adopt the ordinance here. But what I'm saying is, the way that it works in today's environment, if an organization has a request to do a particular subdivision, they go through a sequence of initial meetings where they discuss with the planning department, the sheriff's department, the public works, and representatives from all these agencies to woodshed the particulars of that subdivision before it ever goes to a planning commission hearing. I mean, it's signed, sealed, and delivered before that happens. So they will be enforcing and applying the requirements of this ordinance during those preliminary initial meetings.
Yes, but if it turns out to be contentious, then we're going to drag out the process even further, and we're having a hard enough time as it is getting things processed. And I think there's some, it's going to go to the planning commission, and then it's going to come to the board.
The only applications that would come to the board would be those subdivisions that we would normally route to the board because they're tied together with a zone change or a general plan amendment, or on an appeal to the board. So as an example, a parcel map, which would normally involve a dedication of a fee, would be approved at the Planning Commission The only time your board would see it would be when the map was brought forward for recording. You would have to agree that there was a plan in place to deal with the funds, and that would be the limit of your discretion, not on the map, but on the adequacy of the plan for the parkland dedication
Yeah,
fees.
because as you pointed out on 4, it says, shall submit to the Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
So this has to come back to the board. It doesn't stop at the Planning
The
Commission.
plan does. The map itself could stop at the
Okay, but the, at the time of the approval of the final or parcel map, the CDD, I would like to say, with a recommendation from the Calaveras Parks and Recreation Commission, shall submit to the Board of Supervisors for approval a plan for use, specifying how, when, and where it will use the land or fees or both to develop park or recreational facilities to serve the residents of Calaveras County. That's not the Planning Commission, that's the Board of Supervisors.
That's
The
the
Planning
board.
Commission, I don't mind it going to the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission making a recommendation, just like they do on a zone change or anything. But that has to be done at the Board of Supervisors. It doesn't stop at the Planning Commission level if they approve it,
the
according
map.
to this ordinance.
Okay, the map approval, presuming the applicant was satisfied with the recommendations, would be approved at the Planning Commission stage, and when the parcel map itself was ready to record, staff would bring back the recommendation with the park's recommendation on how those funds were to be expended. This is talking about the expenditure of the funds, because in this case there would be no dedication. And that's what the board would look at and determine that that program was sufficient, not the parcel map itself.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
This is basically the
The
recreational
recommendation
component.
relative to how
That has
those
to come back
funds
to the
will be
board.
used. Those absolutely come to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Okay, Supervisor Tryon, you recommended that, first of all, that change with a recommendation, but
Yes.
you also had some,
No, that was it.
I think that was
okay.
That's it. And so I'll move the, what is it, ordinance?
well, first of all, is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a
Adoption.
comment about this? Okay, any
And I'll
other?
move the adoption with that one amendment.
With that 1 minute and finding that it is not a significant change in the
Yes.
ordinance.
That's not
Second.
significant, that's just a clarification.
Okay, moved and seconded for adoption with the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
We'll file a clean copy with clerk, and I thank you very much.
Okay, moving to item 12, discussion and possible action regarding the resolution authorizing Calaveras Works and Human Services to hire Cynthia Stevens for the position of eligibility worker 1, Human Resources, and the board is required to take an action on this.
Good morning. Francine Osborne, Administration, Human Resources. The personnel request before you requires board action pursuant to code to actually hire a family member of an existing employee. CalWorks and Human Services just recently went through a recruitment for an eligibility worker 1, and the top candidate was the mother of a social worker 3 in the department. Human Resources is recommending that the board approve this, as they will be working for different divisions in the department, and they will not have any supervisory or management control over one another.
Francine, this is a code requirement?
It is. We have a nepotism policy in our code.
I know we do. I mean, I'm going to support this. We always do. It's one of those things that goes back till even probably before Tom was on the board.
Oh, it's not that old.
Yeah, it's that old.
No, it's on paper.
It's pretty old.
It's one of those things like the C-step. I believe we should change the code so that it's a sign-off by the department head and HR. I don't think these should be coming to the board. I mean, if there had been any question over the years, there's never been. I just think this is one of those housekeeping issues, and if everybody's into something going on, then add the CAO. But the department
And I
head.
have the CAO.
Huh?
I would say the department head personnel and the CAO.
That's fine.
Because you can get in
And
trouble with these things, and you better be, you better really give them a
But
good
I'm at-
analysis. I mean,
I
So are
just-
you requesting that I actually
Well, I'd
amend
like
the
to
code
see,
to...
like we did with the C-Step 1, because there were too many coming to the board, and code was changing. I mean, you can just put that on your,
Well, we did it in the forum of the study session. And in this instance, would you like me to bring it back in the study session, and we can talk about how we can finalize
No.
it? Just go ahead and...
I mean, that's my, well,
There's not enough to
two
talk
issues
about.
here. I move this item.
Okay.
second.
Okay, moved and seconded on the item as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Now, do we need a study
Then-
session on this?
No, my recommendation is
pretty
unless the board has some
I agree.
issues, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, I agree.
We're going to do it or not do
We have a consensus. Let's do it.
Okay, it will take formal action to change the code, so we'll
That's
just bring
fine.
it to you in that
As an
form.
action item.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, it's not at the top of your hit parade, but somewhere in there before, I'd say before the snow falls, but I don't want to say that anymore.
Okay, great,
Thank you, Francine.
Okay, we are at item 13, review of correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern. Can we start here with Supervisor Tryon? Do you have
I
any?
do not have anything to bring before the board today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Marita?
Yes, I want to bring up driveways. I've been mentioning driveways for a couple of months now. I would like to make it a more formal presentation to the board. I have emailed the respective department heads on this issue, including the CAO, that I would like to do this. Whether it's a study session item or whether it's an action item, I'm maybe going to leave that to the departments, but I think it should probably be study session. I would like it brought to the board March 4th. And just to go over how we got to where we are, the issues involved. We need to make it more of a public process. The department, Public Works, I believe Community Development's involved in it. We'll be meeting with the stakeholders on February 21st, so when it comes to the board, it will be after that time period. But there needs to be a more formal process now. So unless there's any concerns of the board members, I'd like that scheduled for March 4th. Is that fine, Mr. Miller? March 4th? Okay, thank you. Show that we're not alone. I went to visit my mother. Now, not that that's newsworthy for the
Well,
board.
I think the board's very interested in that. Would you
Well,
expand on that?
I'm going to just try on. Okay, I want to read, there were 2 letters to the editor. Where's the city administration on the noise ordinance? Why do they issue building permits with strict regulations regarding work hours and never follow up on them? When you approach the developers, they say we need to get our work done. They have no concern for their neighbor or residents. We have a high growth rate, tremendous building, but we don't need to be disrespectful or violate civil rights to enjoy a peaceful home. I've reported this to Public Works. So far, no response. Second one, where's the city administration? Do they not see the filth and grime along in this area? Why is it that every light bulb on the bridge is broken, burned out, vandalized? People are going to get hurt. Maybe they should consider a maintenance tax for all those people who do business in the area. And I thought, oh, I'm reading Calaveras County newspapers. This was Puerto Vallarta. So it
I don't think that is
crosses
particularly
county
applicable
lines.
here. Which bridge do we have with the lights shot out?
Tom, just give it a rest. Now, last week I had 2 meetings with Area 12 and with Central Sierra Child Support. Area 12 Agency on Aging will be relocating from Sonora to Standard. We did try to find a place in Angels Camp, but there was no place large enough. We reviewed the impact of the 10% cut. There are 4 vacancies on the Area 12 Advisory Council from Calaveras County, so we need to find some people to fill that. When we move into the budget, I know Common Ground will be coming to the board again. We have budgeted for Calaveras at $2.09, 3,800 meals. For restaurant meals at $2.27, 12,800, and for home delivered meals, $2.48 for 37,200 meals. So Common Ground is serving a lot of the constituents of the county. In child support, they have been flatline budget. We, as I wear my child support hat, budgeted. We have initiated discussions with the union for 2 possible layoffs. More of the customer service calls are going to a central phone bank versus to the local Calaveras and Amador offices. And as jobs come vacant, we have not been filling jobs at Child Support Agency. It just portends what is going to be concerned with Calaveras. Which brings me to Saturday night. I was at the ballet in Sacramento, and I was sitting in front of these women who happened to say, boy, the state budget's going to be really difficult. We have no idea what kind of impact. And I was expecting them to say cities and counties, and they said agencies and departments. So everyone is feeling what's going to be happening with the state budget. I didn't turn around and told them to eat it because the counties don't want any money taken because it was a social occasion. Oh, that's it. Tom, you might like to, on Saturday night, there's a concert fundraiser at Black Bart Theater for Ebbets Pass Forest Watch. If you'd like, I will buy your ticket for you if you will go.
I won't be able to go. I'll be chained to a tree up there someplace.
Good. That means you're not going to take
Actually,
it down.
I'm already committed to the Native Sons dinner on Saturday night.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
Thank you, Native Sons.
Supervisor Cladino, do you have anything to report?
So, how was the ballet?
It was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Tonight I'll be at the Historical Society Board meeting and at the Farm Bureau at the Grange Hall in San Andreas. And tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Saddle Creek, there's a Mountain Valley Emergency Medical Services Board meeting. I'll be there. That's all I have to report.
Okay. As far as what I have to report is tonight I will be attending a meeting of the local Parks and Recreation Committee in Copperopolis. There will be representatives of the county commission also attending. They're coming down for a kind of a meet and greet with our local group down there. We're going to show them some plans and schemes that we have for developing parklands and equestrian walking trails in the Copperopolis Basin. Everybody here is invited to come. It's going to be at the fire station, in the conference room at the fire station. It's Copper Fire at 6:30. So please come to that if you can. There is a joint water committee meeting scheduled for Thursday, the 14th. That, of course, you remember that we set up that joint committee with CCWD and the county represented by me. We're going to launch into the figuring out ways that we can interact with CCWD to fulfill the water and sewer requirements for the county.
Is that a noticed Board of Supervisors CCWD meeting, or is that?
It is a notice by the Joint Water Committee, duly noticed and properly noticed.
Okay, but that's the entirety of the Board of Supervisors, or you as the board representative?
Just I'm the board representative.
Because I read that, and it struck me that it was the Board of Supervisors. Calaveras County Water to Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Okay. I took that as being a joint meeting.
No, we appointed Russ as the
Okay.
rep, but we could go if we want.
No, I understand that, but I was wondering if that was a joint meeting.
Okay, and let's see. I think that's, I just wanted to echo Supervisor Callaway's comments about the noise ordinance particularly, or the absence of a noise ordinance. I get more than a fair share of constituents that have this consternation about their having problems with their neighbors riding motorcycles or around and around and around within 10 or 15 feet of their bedroom walls. And when they call the sheriff's department says, well, our hands are tied because there's no noise ordinance. And I think it's somewhat of a paradox here that we do have a noise ordinance as it pertains to construction and construction hours. But we, once the...
Do we have anything? I don't think that's accurate, is it?
I know that when certain...
It's usually in the approval of the project.
Yeah, it's in the approval documents that they, and even in communities like, I know Saddle Creek has a very strictly enforced
but that's
noise thing,
CCNRs.
CCNRs. But my point is, I think that it's, and we're going to have a study session on the driveway issue. I would submit that at some point we should also think about what we can do to preserve the sanity of our citizens with codifying. It's too late? You want to expand on that?
The sheriff will respond. They respond under disturbing the peace, but not noise.
Okay, all right.
But
They can respond under nuisance, but they don't like to, and it's hard to get a conviction. What do you do? I mean, if you go to court, you lose, so...
I see our CDA director out there. I think could you make a comment on this, please, Stephanie?
Good morning, Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. As we do the general plan update, we'll also be updating our zoning ordinances. Noise is one of the issues that undoubtedly will be addressed during the course of that, so we can either do a study session ahead of time about nuisance type issues, because there's more than just noise that are bothering the neighbors, or we can wait and address it during the general plan update when we do the zoning ordinances, whatever your pleasure is. But it is a topic that will be addressed at some time in the next year.
Okay, thank you. That's good news. All right, at this time, I think... Oh, I'm sorry. Does staff have anything to report? Bob or Jim?
I had the pleasure of attending a COG meeting last week and subsequently had a meeting with Tim McSorley, Executive Director of the COG, and also met with David Andrews from the CCWD. There was a question raised among members in the last couple of weeks about a defensible space limit in rural areas imposed by one of the insurance companies of 1,000 feet. RCRC has checked into it, and what is happening is that in elevations above 1,500 feet, the insurance company is expressing a 500-foot limit for dead trees from a dwelling, a 30-foot limit for combustibles, and a 20-foot space between canopy trees in those areas, again, above 1,500 feet. They did 90, the insurance company did 90 renewal inspections in Calaveras County last year. 60 parcels passed, or 60 dwellings passed without any controversy at all. 30, though, did require remediation. And RCRC is willing to facilitate a meeting between our board members or staff and representatives from the company to get further clarification on this. But the 1,000-foot item that was raised, the insurance company's not aware of this at all. And
Which insurance company?
Allstate.
Okay.
So just to...
We're dealing just with Allstate.
Yeah, the good hands people. But if anybody has any documentation that somebody's actually received a letter or a notice saying you won't be renewed unless, or you're not being renewed because, it would be helpful for us to bring that to our CRC. And they're not aware of anybody else in the state who's had this arise as an issue.
They recently renewed the insurance on my house without any of these issues coming up,
What's your elevation?
about 2,500 feet.
Well, would you send a letter on behalf of the board and ask Allstate to check out Jim Jones's residence?
Oh, yeah.
That's only fair.
Forget I mentioned. Just trying to be helpful.
See where that gets you.
Yeah.
Well, I think, if there's some confusion, it'd be nice if maybe RCRC could facilitate, but it's between CAL FIRE, because they do the whole state. It's not just a Calaveras issue.
The information we were brought is that that insured homeowners in certain areas of the county were informed by Allstate that they needed to have, in order to qualify for their Allstate insurance, that 1,000-foot
But
limit.
we're not the only county. If you're an Allstate customer in Tuolumne or in Modoc, would it be not the same?
It would be, and that's why I'm curious, because RCRC has not gotten these complaints from other counties. There's not a groundswell out there. So if anybody has any documentation, bring it to us and we'll pursue the matter.
Absolutely.
Mr. Jones.
Nothing to report.
Carol Gates, do you have? No? All right, I guess that concludes our public business here this morning. We're going to go into some closed session.